Alrighty, good evening everybody. Sorry, I am running a little bit late, and as you can see I started the stream because I wanted to start on time, or as close to time as possible, and I forgot to switch my lights on. I am so good at this, it's ridiculous how good at this I am, as you can all tell. Anyway, I hope everybody is doing well, and we've got a good few people in here already, which is wonderful. We've got 15 people here already. Wow. All right, we're 3 minutes in. Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody is okay and has had a good few days since Sunday Night Live, which was cool. It was a good show on Sunday. So tonight we are doing Songwriting Simplified, but minus Johnny. So you're only going to get half the wit, I'm afraid, guys. But we're here, and so yeah, I do have a talking point that we might talk about, and a couple of things to demonstrate. And actually, the main thrust of tonight's show, I have to thank Chris Beebe for. If he is here, is he here? I don't know. I don't see his name here. Chris, if you're here, just say hi in the chat because I haven't seen you pop up. But yeah, this is Chris's idea. He asked a really cool question about chords, and so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the different chord types and how to use them, and when is a good time and a good point to use them. Now, there are rules governing music, as we all know, just like there are rules governing sentence structure, so that you make sense and don't just interject a random word for no reason whatsoever that doesn't make sense. So in order for communication to be understood, there have to be agreed things that happen within a sentence to make it understood by both parties, so the person who is speaking and the person who is listening. And so the same is with music. You know, everybody talks about, hey, this is music, there's no rules. Well, actually there are. There are a lot of rules. Now, there are a lot of rules that over time have, shall we say, they're no longer useful. The way the human ear has developed over the thousands of years, things that were very strict rules, and things that you should avoid, and chords and sounds and orchestration that you should avoid, and were even regarded so harshly as to be referred to the devil's interval, which we're going to talk about a bit in a few minutes. Those are no longer such a major issue, but it's important that you're aware of them so that you know about them and you understand the context as to why particular things work and particular things don't work. So, for as much as, we all talk about freedom and everything else, the best freedom creatively that you can have is when you've got boundaries. Because having boundaries means that you are able to push up against those boundaries, and you're able to kind of like, if you were to imagine that music's kind of like a rectangle, you're able to kind of push it the sides a little bit and stretch it just a little bit and try and make it into a sphere just a little bit, kind of like round those edges a little bit. And that's what makes music good. That's what makes music, full of expression, full of emotion, and full of character, and makes you want to listen to it, is because there are rules. And you push up against those rules, you push up against those boundaries, and that's where creativity happens. And that's where some of the best music that's ever been written lives. It lives kind of what I call one block away from the edge. So as a musician, as a composer, as a songwriter, that's where I like to live. I like to live just a little bit dangerously musically. And I'm constantly challenging myself to stretch where I think my personal limitations are, or my personal kind of areas of what I think is acceptable to my ear. So I'm constantly pushing those kind of things as well. So I hope I'm making sense here. Kelly asks, would songwriting include building the layers to a production, like adding a tambourine here, harmonica fill there, that kind of stuff? Those are kind of more production things. Songwriting is more to do with the style, the melody, the chord changes. Some of that is to do with instrumentation. What can make a song really, really, just bring it to extra life is the fact that in, the final chorus, there's a tambourine, and there's not been a tambourine in the whole song. That is a music production trick, a music production device, that you introduce something that's a little bit different, a different flavor. Excuse me. That, just brings a different facet out into the music. But that's not really songwriting. That's more production, more arranging than it is anything else. But as with all things, for as much as music production overall has different phases to it. So you start with the writing phase, then you go into the recording phase, then you go into the mixing phase, and then you go into the mastering phase. So if you like, there are kind of 4 phases. There is at least a little bit of overlap between each one of those 4 phases. So, there is a little bit of give and take. There's nothing really, there are no real, there are rules in music, as I said, at the start, but they're not hard and fast rules. They're not kind of like you absolutely must not do this. They're more kind of like conventions, and these are things that have been discovered over centuries of development, where musicians, composers have kind of agreed, hey, it works best if you don't do this, or it works best if you do this. It's the same with how language is developed. In order that we make sense, a sentence has to have context. You use words in a particular context and in a particular way in which, you hear what I say and you understand what I say and you receive it and you go, oh, right, yeah. Or, no, I don't agree with that. So, there's that aspect to it. But does that mean I can't throw in a completely different inflection? Well, yes, I can. So, you know, as I'm talking to you in my normal kind of Southeast Edinburgh kind of accent, which, incidentally, I've been informed, I was told this today actually, that when I do my videos or my live streams, I soften my accent compared to how I normally speak in kind of like in everyday, you know, when I'm talking to my mates or when I'm talking to my kids or my wife. So I've been told I kind of anglicize how I sound when I'm doing my videos. I've never really noticed it. I've never really been aware of it, but apparently I do. So there it is. So, you know, I can add a certain inflection or a certain weight to a particular word by emphasis, and you can do that in music as well. You can do that in your songwriting as well. Like, for example, let's say your song is in a major key. Let's say it's in E flat major. And let's say with this nice E flat major kind of thing, you've got this nice kind of you know, sort of 1950s blues ballad kind of thing going on. So lots of major seventh chords. So things like this. So you've got that kind of like nice major seventh kind of thing going on, and so your melody will reflect this kind of nice major seventh kind of thing going on in the harmony, and that in itself generates a mood, and so your lyrics will kind of like be in that context. They will have that kind of mood. Yes, you can juxtapose a little bit, so you can write kind of like a bright major kind of sound and have really kind of sad lyrics. You can do that, but you've got to kind of like have a justifiable reason why, otherwise it just doesn't make sense. So you've got this nice major seventh thing going on, but let's say you want to introduce a particularly sad and yet passing event in the lyrics somehow. So this is where you could introduce a chord type that you've not used yet. So we could be working with this nice major seventh thing going on. And, you know, you want to get over the fact that in this lyric there is a point of confusion, of maybe a misunderstanding between the two parties within the narrative of your song. What's a good chord that would kind of simulate or bring to mind that emotion of confusion in the listener, and would kind of add kind of like aural weight, almost like painting those words, and, you know, kind of like adding color to those words that would be indicative of kind of confusion. Well, there are a couple of different chord types you could use. You could use a diminished chord or an augmented chord. Or you could just take a chord that doesn't belong to the key that you're in. So we're in E flat, so I could take a B half diminished chord. It doesn't really fit. So it would kind of like provide this little kind of moment of confusion. But in the context of the words, let's say this is kind of like a passing point of confusion. So we'd do something like this. So it was passing. There was that little diminished chord, which I could have resolved up to the C minor. If I wanted to continue with this kind of dark idea, I could have gone like this. So kind of making that little, you know, dark moment last that little bit longer. I could have gone up to the C minor. And I could have extended that little passage even further if I wanted to. But because I wanted just to make it, maybe it's just one word, just to suggest a little bit of confusion, just one word. That's where that little chord comes in handy. And then I resolved it down to E flat with B flat in the bass, F over A, and then B flat 7 suspended, which leads me back to the E flat again. So I hope that helps, Kelly. That was a really long answer, I realized, because that took me nearly 10 minutes out of our time just to answer that question. But it does lead me nice and neatly onto kind of the main talking point, which is all to do with different chord types. So, yeah, Chris had asked about major seventh chords and what happens to the seventh of the chord to make it major seventh or dominant seventh or minor seventh. He wasn't really sure. So in the key of C, so we were in E flat, now we're in C. Okay, so there's our nice C major chord. So if I drop this octave down a semitone, there we have our nice major seventh chord. All sounds really very nice. And this kind of major seventh interval does provide quite a bit of tension. It was allowed in kind of like the Baroque era, although kind of really as a passing tone. So this would either resolve downwards to the A or it resolve upwards to the octave. Usually, because you want to avoid parallel octaves in Baroque music, you would resolve it down to the sixth, to the A, which is why I went from a C major to F. So we get tension resolving down to the third of the F major chord. So the major seventh is a B natural in the key of C. So let's go through some of the other chord types and what they are and how they sound and how and when you would use them, because they are all incredibly effective and they all serve a different purpose. Some will take you from one key to another, some will provide you with tension, some will provide you with a dark sound if you need it for a particular reason, or you can use these as a passing chord between, like I did earlier, like with that the B diminished going to the E flat with B flat in the bass. It was a passing chord, passing in that it was allowing me to go to the B flat. It was a little stepping stone to the B flat, whilst also secondary function giving me that little bit of darkness that I wanted to undergird those lyrics, those imaginary lyrics. So the major seventh is in C is a B natural. So the other really used a lot in popular music seventh chord would be the dominant seventh chord, and that's where the B goes to a B flat. So now you have a black key. Why do we have this as a B flat here? It's because that is a leading tone loaded with tension, probably more tension than this, and again this note is going to resolve down because this is a chord 5 in the key of F going to chord 1 in the key of F, but I said we're in the key of C, so which we are, but just to know that when you're using a dominant 7th chord, it's going to lead to a new chord 1, so in this case F, but depending upon your musical context, that could be a temporary thing, in which case it's not really a key change. It's just leading you nicely to chord 4, which is F in the key of C, and then you could go back. So kind of like a lot of kind of blues-inspired pop music would do, kind of like would alternate between chord 1 and chord 4, but as dominant 7th chords. So if I just change the inversion of the chord for a second, so here's our C, C7. The only one that really belongs in the key of C is the C7. And even then, this B flat is not native to the key of C major. It's native to the key of F. But when we're on the F7 chord, the E flat is not native to F7, to the key of F rather. It's native to the key of B flat. But when we're just moving between these two chords in a kind of bluesy manner, what we're getting is we're getting this nice blue third, which you would get in a blues scale. So we're getting that nice, that kind of thing going on there. So we're going from and so that's kind of the effect that it has, which is why we use dominant chords, seventh chords in popular music in a completely different way than you would use them in classical or orchestral music. In orchestral music, they are very functional. In popular music and jazz and blues, they're not functional at all. They are a color. They are a tension. They function as just as a chord in their own right. So, quite often in songbooks you will see C7, F7, G7, E flat 7, A flat 7, B flat major 7. You'll see all of those kind of chord types in a song, and you can get confused, especially if you come from a more classical background, a more classical tradition, where you're going, hang on, these are all supposed to have really, these intricate, fine-tuned, voice-leading relationships. Well, yes, they do, but in a popular music context, they don't. They can do. You can use that approach if you want to, but what I'm saying is that by and largely in popular music they don't, and that's because popular music, rock, pop, jazz, blues, have kind of have developed organically. It's an organic music, whereas kind of orchestral music, classical music, what we would call classical music, is something that has developed much more kind of cerebrally. It's much more about understanding the technical aspects of music. And yes, you can write great, beautiful music. Mozart and Beethoven and Shostakovich and Tchaikovsky have written some of the most beautiful music ever written by anybody. And yet it's kind of harmony, chords, and that kind of thing. They function in a very different way. So I've kind of like taken a little tangent a little bit, and I hope I've not lost anybody along the way there. But so that's the power of the major seventh chord and the seventh chord. There are some other ones. So we have if you're going to have a seventh chord with a major third, just make that major third a minor third, and now you get a minor seventh chord, which is great if you're gonna write something that's very minor key orientated, or maybe has an element of Mississippi Delta blues kind of feel to it, which something like Steely Dan's Josie has that. Hang on, way too much reverb. And that's all based out of a D minor 7 chord with the 7th, 3rd, 5th. And then it goes through a whole bunch of like very, very, very clever use of major 7th chords after that. But yeah, so, and that kind of comes out of that Mississippi Delta kind of idea, where, everything's kind of like minor. It comes out of that kind of sound, and then you end up with that, that Josie vamp. So that's the minor 7th. So if I go back to my C major, C7, C minor 7. Well, we're going to keep on altering these 4 voices of our chord. So we've got C, E, G, B, C, E, G, B flat, C, E flat, G, B flat. Okay, we're going to change the fifth now, so we're going to change the G. We're going to drop that a semitone to G flat. And now we're getting into the realms of diminished kind of, this is what we would call a half diminished chord. If we're going to make it into a fully diminished chord, we drop the seventh down again to the A. So we're making that into like a B double flat is what it would be in the key of C. And that's really quite dark and foreboding, isn't it? Loaded with tension, because basically the chord is built out of minor thirds. There's one, there's one, there's one. So it's all, that particular chord is just built purely out of minor thirds, which is why it sounds so dark and foreboding. It's the ultimate in minor darkness. Okay, so what other things can we do to these four voices? Well, we can actually go back to our major seventh chord. Let's sharpen instead of flatten, shall we? Because flatten makes things darker. So we're nice and bright, a little bit darker, darker still, even more dark. So dark you can't see your hands in front of your face. So what if we sharpen things and make things tense in a different kind of way? So if this is kind of making things darker, let's sharpen something. So let's sharpen this fifth here. So we got the G, let's turn that into a G sharp. And that has a different flavor altogether. Okay, let's flat our seventh, so we're playing a C7 chord. But let's also raise that fifth as well. So you get this C7, what we call a C7 sharp 5 chord. If I change the voicing, you'll hear it a little bit more clearly. And then if I raise this fifth, see what this particular voicing is really effective if you're wanting to go from major to minor. You'd use this as a chord 5 going to a minor chord. So C7 with the sharp 5 takes you nicely to F minor. And the reason being is because the G sharp or A flat, when you're heading into the key of F, into the key of F minor, I should say, A flat is native to the key of F minor. So you're kind of preparing your listener for that particular sound to be coming along. All right. So that's what we would call an augmented. So C7, you could call it C7 sharp 5 or C7 augmented. Okay. And then after that, you're into the realms of adding all sorts of funny notes to it. And then you're into jazz, really, after that. Okay. So those are the primary chord types that I've kind of gone over very quickly. I'll take a couple of questions and then we'll come back and I'll show you ways in which you can use some of these chord types, especially these darker, more altered ones. Would-be asked, do I have a favorite chord? Good question. Do I have a favorite chord? Yeah, I think I do, actually. I have a favorite chord type more than a favorite chord. It's more a favorite chord type and a favorite way that I really like to voice that chord. And voicing basically means putting the notes in a particular order when I play them. So it's a major 7th chord, but it's got a few extra notes in it. So I'm going to play this on A flat. So it would be like an A flat major 7 chord, and I'll show you how I like to voice it. So A flat in the bass, and then I have an F after that. So I've kind of like got the 6th, if you like, in the bottom here as well. And then a B flat, and then a C, and then a D, and then a G. And that is A flat major 7 sharp 11. with a 6 and a 9. So the 6 is down the bottom there, and there's the 9, and everything's kind of nice and closed. And I really like it because although it's a major chord, because of all the other notes, the other voices you've got going on, it kind of sounds somehow not really major somehow. And so yeah, so that'd be my favorite chord and favorite chord type. All right, I'm just going to back up the chat just a little bit. I'm going to close that pop-up that's just popped up. Don't know why. And just see if I can catch any questions that I might have missed. All right. Let's see. Woody says, love your accent. Okay, thank you very much. Kyle didn't have a stream and he needed to refresh to catch the show. I'm sorry about that. Martin says, I think arranging has a lot to do with quality songwriting. Aerosmith's Dream On is musically almost identical to Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, but they are radically different feelings. Yeah. In some respects, you're quite correct. I could respond to that, but it would take maybe 20 minutes to kind of really unpack that. There's a lot of stuff in there, Martin, but yeah, some interesting points you've raised there. Let's see, what else do we have? Is this? Heel Flip Shred. I think you're new. If you're still watching, I hope you are. When you say major seventh, what is the seventh meaning? Okay, what do I mean by major seventh? If I count from, if it's a C major 7 chord, if I count from 1, which would be the C, and count up all the notes in between, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's the 7th there. And it's major because it falls within the C major scale, so it's not altered in any way. Okay, so it's not altered in any way, which is why I call it major. Okay, but then if I drop that by a semitone or a half step to a B flat, now it's dominant 7th, and if I drop the 3rd by a half step to E flat, we now have a minor 7th chord. And then if I drop the 5th by a half step, we get a half diminished chord. Then if I drop the 7th again by another half step, you get a full diminished chord. Okay, and those are kind of, and then of course you've got the augmented chord as well. You augment the major 7 sharp 5 or major 7th augmented, which is where the 5th of the chord, C, E, G, there's the 5th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That 5th gets sharpened by a half step, but we keep the major 7th on top, or you could put the major 7th on the bottom if you want. Which, incidentally, if you put the major 7th on the bottom and put the C in the bass, if I was to not play the C for a minute, I have an E major chord. So, and then if I put the C on the bottom, now you get this weird chord. So if I'm going to play this kind of particular voicing, I like to do this. I like to alternate between a G triad, G, B, and D. So go from a G to an E chord, which kind of gives you that kind of familiar sound of, you know, those biblical epic sound movies like Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, for example. You get lots of that happening where you have a major chord moving by an interval of a third. And then if I put the C on the bottom of that. So I like to do that. And it just sounds a little bit different. So I hope that answers that question. Is a semitone a half step? Yes, it is. Kyle says G major 7, G major chord with an F sharp on top. Yes, that is correct. G major scale. There's your 7th. You're absolutely right. Sheila says, do you have any info on open black chord voicing? Open black chord voicing. I want to learn more about how to write chord voicings. Open. I'm not sure what you mean by open black. I'm not quite sure what you mean by open black chord voicing. If you mean kind of like using the black, just only the black notes of the keyboard to create your chords, that would be using effectively the G flat pentatonic scale as kind of like a mode from which you derive your chords. So essentially, if you're going to write harmony modally in that sense, just basically deriving the chords from a scale rather than from, hey, this is a major 7th, this has got a major 3rd in it, a minor 3rd, or whatever, then what you would do is I recommend you just pick out some of those notes and just move them about. So I might do something like this. And just, alternate between wide open voicings, like where you've got 4ths and second inversion major chords, and closed voicing where you've got and then kind of like spread those about. So maybe you go close voice, close voicing with the left hand and wide open with the right, like this. And really, they're not really major chords, not really minor chords. They're just groups of notes from the G flat pentatonic scale, and that's just using all the black notes. Okay. And all you're doing is just picking out notes and putting them together until you find voicings that sound good, really. But they're not really major chords, not really minor chords either. So don't even think about, oh, how do I write this as give it a chord symbol, because you're not going to be able to. When you're kind of in modal land, where everything is based on a scale, you're not really going to be able to do that. So in that situation, you're probably best off actually notating it if you're into writing notation. If you're not really into writing notation, then kind of write the letter names that you want the piano player to play kind of vertically rather than horizontally. So put, like F sharp here, A sharp, D sharp, E, whatever, C sharp, D sharp, and just write them in a vertical stack like that, and your keyboard player, whoever that is, will pretty easily work out exactly what you're meaning. So I hope that helps. Let's see, Kelly's got a question here that I want to get to because it's a good one. You said the major 7th chord comes with tension and wants to resolve up or down. Using C major 7th, what are those up or down chords? Okay, so C major 7th, this interval here wants to resolve to there or resolve up to the octave. But to be honest, if you resolve up to the octave, it's pretty weak, and this is why in the Baroque era they said, hey, avoid parallel octaves. Because it's a little bit of a weak resolution. This is much more of a stronger resolution, resolving it down. Which is why sometimes you hear this. Here's an F major chord. So I'm using that B, and then I'm resolving it down, but obviously it's on an F major chord now. But the idea is still the same, that the tension in that interval needs to resolve down to, so basically a C major 7 resolves to an F major chord most of the time, although you could change it up and resolve it to this, which is basically I'm playing an F major chord, but I'm putting the B flat in the bass instead. So you can have lots of fun doing that, actually. You could play that for hours and hours. C major 7, and then this kind of F major chord with a B flat in the bass. And it's a surprise. You're not expecting it. So that kind of works as well. Martin Week says, isn't that what the Beatles do with Hard Day's Night, just using the key of G? Yeah, kind of. Heel Flip Shred says he's still awake. Good. Okay. Okay, let's see. So Kelly says, major third to minor third. Run that by me again. Okay. There's a major third. C to E. C and E is a major third, because it sounds nice and bright. If you drop the E by a half step, you get C to E flat, which is a minor third interval, which is darker. So bright, dark, bright, dark, bright, dark, bright, dark, bright, dark, dark, dark. And then the thing about blues is that it's kind of in between. It's kind of, which is why blues sounds mellow, right? Because it's kind of not quite bright, but it's not quite dark either. It's kind of somewhere in between this area here that you can't really get to because it's between the notes on the piano. But on the guitar, you can bend the string. On the trumpet, you can bend the note. The saxophone, you can bend the note. Clarinet, you can bend the note. Human voice, you can definitely bend the note. But on the keyboard, you can't. So there are, which is why you hear this kind of quite a lot on the keyboard. Those kind of crunching notes into each other is kind of an attempt at simulating a bent note on a guitar. So yeah, so that's why blues kind of sounds mellow, because it's kind of neither bright nor dark. Okay, so major, minor. Okay. Let's see. I'm still trying to scroll down. Heel Flip Shred says, can jazz and metal fuse? Yes, and they certainly have done very successfully. If you listen to a band called the Brecker Brothers, they're no longer together because one of the brothers died 11 years ago. But they made a record in when was it? I think it was 1978, called Heavy Metal Bebop. And the record was quite genuinely an attempt to kind of fuse heavy rock and jazz together. Actually pretty successfully, I think. And I think kind of like the major hit tune off of that record was called Some Skunk Funk, which is worth checking out. Just do a YouTube search for it. You will find it. Just type in Brecker Brothers, Some Skunk Funk, and it'll pop up. And I recommend you play the video, because it gives you a pretty good example of, you know, if you're a purist heavy metal person, then you're probably going to go, yeah, that sounds nothing like heavy metal. But you know, it probably doesn't strictly sound like heavy metal. But it's not strictly jazz either. It's kind of an attempt to take elements of heavy rock and elements of jazz and kind of bring them together. So it's neither as aggressive as heavy metal, but it's neither as colorful as jazz is. It's kind of it's kind of both. But so what you end up with is aggressive sounding music with a heavy beat, with plenty of distortion going on, but you also get jazz harmony, and you know, melody lines derived from jazz harmony as well. So it does work. Harmonic E minor instead of... Oh, that jumped. I missed that. Let me go back up. Kelly says... there was a question there that I completely missed about something melodic minor, and I can't find it. Kelly says that walk down a note at a time from major 7 on down to many others in a pleasing walk. What is that? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Kelly, I'm afraid. Are you talking about where I started with a major 7th and then just gradually altered each of the intervals until I ended up with a fully diminished chord? So we start with major 7, we flat the 7th to get C7. Then you flat the 3rd. Basically, by flatting, I'm lowering the interval by a half step. So C major 7. So the B becomes B flat, and you get C7. The E becomes E flat. You get C minor 7. The G becomes G flat. You get C half diminished 7. And then you flat the 7th again from a B flat to an A, and you get C diminished, which is entirely minor thirds. And I like to use an arpeggio of a diminished chord over a dominant 7th chord when I'm improvising, but that's a whole nother story. And why that works, I don't know. I just happened upon it one day and it just sounded cool, so I use it quite a lot. Okay, I'm going to jump down to the bottom and see if what I'm doing helps. You need a whammy bar. Yeah, if there was such a thing for electric pianos, I would use it. Okay. Diet. Excuse me, diet metal. I love it. That's really good. Okay, so you got it. Great. Okay, that's really good. All right, so we have 10 minutes left of the show. So, so when would I use a diminished chord? Because it is such a rare sounding chord. You know, if I really want to have like a sense of foreboding and real darkness, then yes, I will use such a chord. You know, it can work quite nicely if you want to go really, really dark. But contextually in a song, where might I use it? Well, if I'm in a minor key, so let's say I'm in C, if I'm in C minor. So I used the diminished chord at the end there when I went to here. There's my diminished chord, and the reason why it's there, this is chord 2 in the key of C minor, D diminished. And then I went to G with the raised 5, with that sharp 5. The reason why I did that is because it leads me back to C minor. Okay, so basically I'm going. Okay, so that's when I would use a diminished chord, unless I'm wanting to highlight a specific line where it's dark, then I'll use lots of diminished chords. But otherwise, I only use them where they're kind of required, like in a 2-5-1 in a minor key, for example. Kelly says transition to 5 chords. Sorry, I'm kind of country, but yeah. Yep, that's right. Okay, we've got about 7 minutes left, so we're kind of into the last few moments, and I'm going to take a swig of frighteningly strong tea, possibly because the tea bag is still in here. That'll keep me going for the next 6 hours or so. Okay, let's see. Any more questions? You're talking about guitars. Ken Moss says, in the key of A flat, I resolve an A flat diminished chord to an A flat major chord. It was surprising how natural it sounded because it seems to break resolving rules. Well, yes, it would, because that would be I don't know what you call it. I might call it a self-reflective resolution. I really don't know what to call that, but you're talking about taking a diminished chord on A flat and then resolving it to, I suppose it kind of does. You could certainly oscillate between the two and get an interesting effect. Yeah, you could kind of suggest kind of both light and dark at the same time by doing that. Especially if you then went like this. Yeah, that kind of works. Yeah, that kind of works. Yeah, I quite like that idea, Ken. Martin says, if you want to get a good way to get a better handle on this, listen to the Texas swing band Asleep at the Wheel. Yeah, they're a good band. They do a lot of exactly what JL is talking about, using major seventh chords, D minor walk-ups, etc. Call it a Lipson reflection chord. No, thank you. I do not wish to have anything named after me. Ever. Except possibly a fire hydrant. And that would be maybe about it. But yeah, I have no desire to have anything named after me. So I think, Ken, that idea works very nicely, very well. And that would be where I would use a diminished chord as well. I think that's a really good example. Minor chords are really helpful and really handy, even in a major key, because you need them to do to affect a key change anyway. So, you know, let's staying in A flat, Ken, you know, and then wanting to go to I don't know, the key of C. And there I am in the key of C. And basically what I did was I went A flat to D flat to establish the A flat major chord, and then the A flat major key rather, and then D minor. Hang on. Yeah, D minor to G7 to C. And now I want to go back, so and now I'm back in A flat again. Let's go back. And let's just try meandering through a few different keys. Now I'm back in the key of A flat again, after a little bit of wandering. Alright, so minor chords, incredibly helpful, because without them you're going to find changing from one key to another really hard. And we've talked about that in previous streams, and I've got a video series, a two-part video series up on my channel, which is called The Power of the Key Change. If you want to know how to use minor seventh chords and dominant seventh chords to affect a key change from one major key to another, go check out part 1. If you're wanting to learn about minor key changes, so going from a major key to a minor key, or minor key to another minor key, then watch part 2, because in part 2 I show you how you use a diminished chord and the augmented seventh chord, the seventh with the sharpened fifth, which, so let's say it was G, it'd be G7 with the D sharpened to a D sharp, and how that leads nicely to C minor. Okay. Okay. So that's all contained in part 2, and I go through how you make those chords and how you find them in the minor scale as well. So go check those out, and I hope that they're helpful in you developing your handle on minor chords, major chords, dominant seventh chords, and so on and so forth. But we are just about out of time. Kelly says, I need country music rehab. Woodby says, great stream, JL. Always great to watch you and learn. Well, I'm glad that helped. Kelly says, your studio is named after you. That's true. That's a good point. Okay. All right, so my studio and a fire hydrant. Somebody go to your city council and ask them to name a fire hydrant after me, and that'll be fine. I'll be happy with that. Kelly says, speaking of which, I just PM'd you some rehab. Oh, right, okay. All right, guys, we are going to call it there because it is 1 minute past the hour, and it's been a good show. I've enjoyed it, and I think we've had somewhere in the region of, hang on, I can actually go and find out what peak viewership was. What was peak viewership? How do I find that out? I have to scroll down, I think. So we got 19 in the room just now, and I think we peaked at 30, which is very, very good, actually. So yeah, we did pretty good. And I want to scroll back up. And I'm going to say a very, very, very big thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. It's been lots of fun. Hang on, I'm just wanting to try and make sure I have my correct things queued up, which I now do. But yeah, it's been loads of fun, folks, and thanks for coming out to watch this solo version of Songwriting Simplified. Tomorrow, Johnny will be back as usual with his stream, and he's continuing his producing the voice, recording the voice week this week, and then on Sunday, this coming Sunday, I'll be back here same time for my Sunday night live, and I'll have another great talking point, which won't necessarily be to do with chords. I have no idea what it is yet, but just to say, if actually you have something that you would like for me to have as a talking point for Sunday, then please do, if you're on Facebook, message me, or you can email me at johnny@johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk, and just in the subject, just put in talking point for Sunday, and then just in the body of your email, just tell me what that is, and I'll see which ones pop up out of the subjects that you guys want to talk about, and I will pick one. And who knows, it could be yours. So if you are up for that, then please do drop me an email, send me a Facebook message, and we'll make talking points more about what you would like me to talk about rather than me trying to think of something. That might actually work better and might make the show a bit more engaging. So we'll try that on Sunday. So drop me a line, let me know what you're interested in learning about, and I will just pick one and go with that. All right, so thanks a lot, everybody, and I'm going to wish you all a very, very pleasant evening, and I'll see you on Sunday. Bye for now.